Hello and welcome to Adventures in Theater History, where we bring you the best stories from the deep and fascinating history of theater in the city of Philadelphia. I'm your host, Peter Schmitz, and our theme music is by Christopher Mark Colucci. We are continuing our Season 4 of the podcast as we explore the modern history of Philadelphia nonprofit theater. Today, I am interviewing Seth Rozin, the founder and longtime artistic director of the InterAct Theater Company, which since 1988 has been dedicated to producing new and challenging plays, particularly ones which explore important political and social themes. But first, just as in our last episode, I have a brief clip from the perfect person to introduce our guest today. By an amazing coincidence, last week, Seth alerted me that our mutual friend, the actor Frank Wood, was coming to Philadelphia. Frank was one of my classmates at NYU Drama School, and for several years he was in the company of the People's Light and Theater out in Malvern. And Frank has gone on to become a Tony Award-winning Broadway actor, and he's on TV, and he's in movies, and even more importantly, Frank has remained just an overall lovely and nice person. It turned out that Frank was coming to Philadelphia on a brief sojourn in order to work with a staged reading of a play that was in development with the New York Stage and Film Company on the Penn campus in West Philadelphia, specifically in the downstairs Hal Prince Theater space at the Annenberg, which was in fact the exact same place that InterAct Theater Company first performed in 1988, and Frank Wood was in that original InterAct company. So, as soon as I could, I called Frank, we made arrangements to meet up, and one day, after his rehearsal was over, I picked Frank up in my car. And since I knew that I was interviewing Seth very soon, as we drove along Walnut Street, I opened the recording app on my phone, and I asked Frank.
But tell me what Seth was like in those early days.
Seth was he was one of those, he had a kind of entrepreneurial spirit and confidence. He's calm, kind, and thoughtful and funny, and he was never more entrepreneurial than he was those things, did not wear driven to make a theater on his sleeve as much as he wore I want to make art with the people I like doing important work on his sleeve.
So, with that perfect introduction, let's begin my interview with Seth, which, for the record, took place in early October of 2025. Seth spoke to us over Zoom from the offices of the InterAct Theater at the Drake in Center City, Philadelphia, as he prepared to begin rehearsals for the InterAct's fall season. Welcome to Adventures in Theater History. We have with us today Seth Rozin, director, playwright, artistic director, lyricist, nonprofit entrepreneur, now beginning his 38th season with the InterAct Theater Company in Philadelphia. Seth, welcome to Adventures in Theater History.
Happy to be here, Peter. Happy to finally get a conversation with you. I'm very excited.
Well, for the listeners at home, we've been having about 25 minutes of technical difficulties, but here we are now, and you sound great, and I can see you, and all is well. Seth, tell us what I'm beginning to think of in my own mind when I talk to people, your origin story. Tell us of how you got here on this planet with all your superpowers. You're, again, from the Philadelphia area, although the suburbs, right?
Yes, I grew up in Marion, Pennsylvania. I actually was born in Bryn Mawr, but when I was about 2.5, my parents moved to Marion. Yeah. And I had a lot of great memories growing up in that suburb. It was very welcoming and great for kids, and culturally not that alive in terms of what it had going on there, but my parents brought me into town and exposed me.
Well, you had a couple of amazing parents. Your father, Paul Rozin, the professor at University of Pennsylvania, is in the psychology department, but he's known famously, and I'll try to phrase this correctly, as the scholar of disgust.
He's actually coined the king of disgust in the world of psychology. Yes,
but that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. In fact, my brother and I have been hoping for years to try to get someone in Philadelphia to launch a campaign to start the International Museum of Disgust, which my father would be a primary scholar consulting on. We have all of the different exhibits. We already thought about a lot of them. He pioneered the study of disgust as a legitimate universal human emotion. And in fact, the movie Inside Out, the animated movie,
Yeah.
which has a character of disgust,
Right.
would not have had that character had my father's research not happened before.
Was he a consultant? Did they call him?
No,
or like
no, this was
accredited him?
much later. But the
Yeah.
point is that when my father first decided to study this, which was expanding his initial research, it was poo-pooed, pun intended, in the field. Disgust was not considered a worthwhile area
Right.
of study.
Yeah.
And he really demonstrated that it is a universal human emotion.
And then your mother, Elizabeth, she was more about cooking and flavors and the history of food, and eminent cookbook author.
He was a culinary historian who wrote several cookbooks, mostly about the evolution and development of cuisines, how they intermingled, how they impacted each other, and how they defined the cuisines that we now identify, throughout the world.
So that's an amazing and stimulating household on many levels. You have
We
two
feel
brothers,
very-
right? You have two older and younger brother, right?
I have an older Vietnamese brother who was a foster child who came to us when he was 15 from Vietnam, from the war.
Uh-huh.
And then I have a younger brother who's 5.5 years younger than me. My younger brother is a music theory professor at Westchester University.
Right.
My
Lex.
older brother, Phuc, is a juggler
Yeah.
and magician on cruise ships. And my older sister, who someone in this conversation went to graduate school with,
That would be me.
is now a therapist and a yoga teacher and wellness teacher, but also started her career as an actor and went to school with you.
Right, and was one of the earliest actors in your company, which we'll come to in a minute. So you went did you go to Lower Merion High School then?
I did indeed.
Yeah,
Marion
and then
Elementary, Bala Cynwyd Junior High School, and Lower Merion.
Merion all the way. You ended up at the University of Pennsylvania along with Lillian, and your major, I noticed, do I have this right, was aesthetics?
My major was aesthetics.
I didn't know that was a major.
Well, it wasn't. It was an individualized major. I was one of those like 18 kids at the graduation who marched with a big banner, self-made banner that had a big I on it for independent majors.
Okay.
Everyone else had fancy English or history. And it was an independent major where I got to pull together the courses that I wanted to take, call it aesthetics. And ironically, the philosophy department didn't teach aesthetics in the 3 years after I had declared my major, so I never even got to take that class. But it was basically an academic background to the arts.
Sure, but part of that was because the University of Pennsylvania, famously, it only believes in the theory of art and performance.
That is correct. And that was both disappointing, but also liberating in certain ways, because Penn was so unfocused on applied arts. It allowed all the extracurricular arts groups to really thrive. That's where everybody cut their teeth.
Right. So there was the Mask and Wig and other groups in the undergraduate groups would do the theater, and they might have a faculty sponsor, but it wasn't in the faculty otherwise weren't involved.
Correct. And we actually had no faculty sponsors. We had to learn everything on our own. We had some administrators at the university, like my mentor, Kaki Marshall, who helped advise on certain things, but mostly we figured it out on our own, which turned out to be an incredibly great education. And Penn produced a tremendous number of producers and stage managers.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's the Penn.
Figure stuff out.
If you have to say who comes from Penn, and you don't generally point to writers, directors, and actors, but you point to producers. You point to Hal Prince, of course, primarily, but other people like yourself are very entrepreneurial and very self-starting.
Yeah.
Speaking of self-starting, I was looking through the archives for articles about you that have been published over the years, and one of the first things that popped up was about a production of Stephen Sondheim's The Frogs, which what you staged in the Penn pool, much like it had originally been done back in the 70s in the Yale pool, but you decided to recreate that Ivy League experience for people in the 1980s.
It was a bit of a controversy at the time. It was the Spring Fling musical, and the group that produced it, Quadramix, came to me early in the year and they said, "We want you to direct the Spring Fling musical." And they had a bunch of ideas. And I said, "I'm happy to direct, but I'm not interested in any of those shows." And we ultimately thought this would be really fun. And they got on board with it. And it was a bit crazy because the show is not particularly good. It has all kinds of challenges, and it's just a big gimmick to do something it's not mostly in the pool, but it's at a pool with a little
Right.
bit of pool activity. And it was quite fun and a great learning experience. We had the Penn synchronized swimming team do some of the stagehand work of bringing set pieces floating on. We didn't see the machinery. The machinery was the divers. So that was really fun. And
Okay.
Strike was really fun because we got to all jump in the pool to take things apart.
What other shows did you create there? What were you working on while your time at Penn?
So I was super active. I did 3 or 4 shows a year. I was very active with Penn Players, which is the student group that worked out of the Annenberg Center and hired professional directors. So I got a lot of exposure to them. I started a group called Arts House Theater, which is the dorm I was in, and we created a theater group out of that, which has persisted since I started that, and we did whatever we wanted to do.
Right.
We did a production of The Fantastics. We did a musical called The King of Hearts. We did The Frogs with Quadremics. And so I worked with about 5 different groups, but most of it was Penn Players as a director or an actor. Directing was we brought in professional directors, but we were able to assist. And I did mostly acting with Penn Players, a lot of directing outside of Players, and a lot of producing.
And did you ever get in trouble? Did you ever do something that just made everybody mad at you?
Well, sure. I got the administration mad at me because I was always trying to work around the rules. So for instance, every student production had to go through the Student Activities Committee, and every show that was produced at Penn had a little thing at the bottom that said sponsored by SAC, the Student Activities Committee. But at one point, a friend of mine and I wanted to do a Sondheim review, and we weren't part of a group, and the Student Activities Committee wouldn't endorse it. So we made a poster that said produced by SAD, which was Seth and David. And they were not happy about that. We rented the space, booked the space just like anybody else did,
Right.
waited for others to get their turns, and then we booked the space and did the show on our own dime. And they weren't happy about that. They didn't like the fact that I was always working around the rules legally, but you know what I mean? And I think I pissed a few people off.
Okay, well, that's good. Everybody should do that.
Yeah, I was an annoyance to some, and also they admired me for my chutzpah and my entrepreneurial spirit. And later on, when InterAct grew into a real theater, they saw where the beginnings of that were.
Right, and then they claimed you. They were like,
exactly.
Remember the time we were really mad at you? Now we're proud of you. We like that.
Right.
So let's talk about the origin of InterAct. So you were doing undergraduate theater. You were coming up, and I first met you. You came to New York because Lillian was doing shows there at NYU. But did you feel like I'm going to start doing shows as soon as I get out of school? Was that always the plan?
I always knew I wanted to direct, and I was pretty sure by the end of graduation that I wanted to start a company at one point, but I didn't yet have a personal aesthetic. I didn't know what kinds of shows I wanted to do. I was pretty sure it was going to be plays, not musicals, but I didn't really have an evolved aesthetic. And what happened actually is that for the first year out of school, I spent painting, oil painting, not house painting.
Right, because you're a visual artist as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I did some directing of new plays through a company called Playworks that did readings, developmental work locally. And in the middle of that first year out of school, my parents got divorced, which was quite a shock to me. It was very upsetting. And for the first time in my life, I thought maybe I should consider moving away. And I actually went out to San Francisco, where I had a great experience in my summer after college, and thought maybe I'd move there. And while I was there, I got a call from my college mentor, Khaki Marshall, who was the associate director of the Annenberg Center and oversaw student performing arts. And she asked me if I would be interested in coming back and being her assistant, because she lost someone and wanted to replace them and thought I would be great. And I thought that would be a good job to start with. So I came back and took that job. And while I was at the Annenberg Center, where my job was to oversee student performing arts and to connect students with professional shows that came through the Annenberg, I was fortunate to help a group called the Irish Universities Theatre Company, which was a group of people who had graduated from grad and undergrad programs in Ireland into a company, and they brought Irish plays, both classical and contemporary, to the Northeast, mostly at colleges. And while they came to Penn, my job was to help promote their show, get them housing, interact with students, and so forth. And got very excited about what they were doing, which is a form of international exchange cultural exchange through theater. That theater was the vehicle by which we learned about each other, about our values, about our aesthetics, about the issues that matter to us. So after they left, I worked with their tour director, who was also an American citizen, got him a job at the Annenberg Center. And the two of us, along with some colleagues I brought together who had graduated Penn with me, we started InterAct, and that's where our name came from.
So it means international acting?
Well, international is part of it. Act in terms of that it's theater, not just interacting internationally.
Yeah.
And then the idea of interaction, meaning the literal cultural exchange that goes on when a live performance is engaging a group of people. So we felt that the name was apropos.
Oh, it's a great name. There is, of course, another InterAct theater in Seattle, yes?
There were 4 other InterAct theaters we learned after that.
Really?
One was a Gilbert and Sullivan company. One was a highly experimental theater. And one was intergenerational. And the other one was in Seattle, which was a regular theater.
Right.
And so
you weren't the first people to think of this pun.
We were not, and I don't regret it, but it isn't the most unique name, as it turns out.
Well, it's always of Philadelphia if you ever search for it online. Yes. So you found a group of actors, including Lillian, who at that point was out of NYU, and Frank Wood. Before he even went to People's Light, he reminds me, he came down here to work with you.
Yes, I brought him in because I knew him through Lil, and he was a terrific actor. We had a company of 8 actors who played a bunch of roles in 5 plays, but 4 evenings of plays. I directed Seascape by Edward Albee. We did Seduced by Sam Shepard, in which Frank played a young Howard Hughes type character. We did The Emperor Jones by Eugene O'Neill, and then we did a double bill of This Property is Condemned by Tennessee Williams, along with Sexual Perversity in Chicago by David Mamet.
Which have been built 2 one-acts, but very different.
Very
different flavors.
But the idea was that these 5 plays really communicated something about American values, the character of America.
Right. Well, all those are fascinating plays. I just note that the Emperor Jones has come up so many times over the course of this podcast. I've mentioned that play more than any others. And it's funny because now it's considered a play that's almost unperformable, mostly because of its dialect issues.
Yes, it would be politically incorrect to do that play today. Yes.
Yeah, but you found it worthwhile doing back in the mid-1980s.
Yes, well, we picked
because they had just done it at the Philadelphia. They'd just done a
American Music Theater Festival.
Just done it.
And I had seen that. I saw that, and I actually was pretty excited by it. Emperor Jones was the most known of the 5 plays we'd done. Sexual Perversity had a nice life, but it was a 1-act, so it didn't get produced widely at theaters. This Property is Condemned is a lovely but little produced play. And Seduced by Sam Shepard and Seascape by Edward Albee, nobody does.
Right.
So that was the beginning of me recognizing in myself that my aesthetic was to not do populist work, that we were interested in finding alternative stories that weren't the ones that everybody was familiar with.
You performed them first here in Philadelphia at the Hal Prince Theater in the Annenberg Center, right? And then you you got a sponsorship from Aer Lingus Airlines, and they said, we'll fly you over.
Well, two things on that. First of all, yes, in the middle of the rehearsal process, we were having trouble fundraising, frankly, and trying to do an international tour. I mean, just going abroad with a company of 8 actors and a few others into another place with a set and so forth. We didn't know what we were doing. There was no internet, and we didn't know what we were doing on any level except making theater itself. And even that, we were pretty young. And at a certain point, we discovered that we might not be able to do it. One of our lowest moments, we had just had a meeting among the core that we might have to call this whole thing off. We get this letter, which is still on my wall here at InterAct, from Aer Lingus, who we had asked for some airfares, and we had actually gone up to New York and met with someone there. We got this letter saying, we are giving you 14 round-trip airfares to Dublin. And
God bless their hearts.
we looked at each other and we said, well, we have to go now. We can at least get there. So that was a really, really big moment. And then flash forward to the opening. We had 1 week of performances here, as you mentioned, at the Harold Prince Theater. And the very first performance, we did each show once before we went away, one time. This is important to the whole story. And our official opening was with Seascape, the play I directed by Edward Albee. And we had invited Edward through mail through his agent.
As one does, you sort of ask the
Right.
playwright, to see if it'll work. Yeah.
Correct. To come down. And to our surprise, a couple days before opening, he agreed to come down.
Yeah, well, he was famous for this, actually. He wanted to see people do his plays.
Exactly.
He was very interested in education. He was interested in talking to young theater people.
And he also wanted to control how everybody did his plays.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that, but yes.
That's true. So I had the great fortune. I mean, it was a real thrill. I had the great fortune of going to pick him up at the train, and I got him to his hotel, and he came to the show, and he sat absolutely stone-faced through the whole show. And then afterwards, there was a reception. This was literally our opening night of InterAct. And he walked around the reception completely stone-faced. A lot of people pointing and saying, "That's Edward Albee, that's Edward Albee." But nobody approaching him because he did not seem approachable.
Okay.
He had agreed up front to meet with us the following morning.
Right.
So he didn't say anything after the show that night. We don't even know why he stayed at the reception. The next morning, we gathered in a rehearsal room at the Annenberg Center where we had worked and set up chairs in a circle with a video camera focused on the chair that he would ultimately sit in. And he came in and he sat down, he crossed his legs, and he looked at us very, very seriously. And he said, "There are some really lovely things in your production." And we all went, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And then he said, "I don't want to talk about those." And then he spent 2 hours telling us everything that was wrong. None of which was offensive to us, because mostly what he was telling us is that we're way too young, and the actors in particular are way too young to understand middle age.
Yeah, it's about a middle-aged couple on the beach, and these two creatures crawl out of the sea. Yeah.
Correct. So Frank Wood and Grace Kongleski played, back then she was Jenny Grace.
Right.
They played the couple, and Frank was maybe 30 or 31 at the most, and Grace was my age, so she was like 24, and they played this middle-aged couple who were contemplating what the rest of their life after their kids are grown up and so forth is going to be. And Bruce Robinson and Lillian, my sister, played lizards coming out of the sea.
Right.
And it was actually, I thought the show was pretty good for our age, but Edward told us
otherwise. He said, if you're used to college productions and graduate school productions, that would all be normal practice. But he was giving you credence as professionals. If you're really going to stage this play, you need to go about it the right way.
But it was exciting. And then what's important about the one performance side of that we did each show once is that we did that week, and then I think, if I remember correctly, there was a week off while we were prepared to got ready to go to Ireland. And so then we go to Ireland, and our first stop was Sligo in the northwest coast of Ireland, and we did a week of performances of all shows except Seascape, just because of they chose which plays got performed. And then we moved to a place, what was supposed to be a hotel theater in a place called Clifton on the west coast of Ireland. And that was going to start with Seascape. So we show up and we go into this hotel, lovely old Irish hotel. And we walk in and we say, "We're the American theater troupe." And they're like, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Let's take you to the theater." And they walked us into a snooker room. Snooker is billiards.
Yeah.
And the only light in the room was
they would say.
Snooker. The only light in the room was the fluorescent coin-operated light over the table in the middle of the room.
I'm sorry, coin-operated light?
Coin-operated light. So you paid for the light for the time of your snooker, right? So the opening, first of all, we had to move the snooker table to the one end of the room. Mm-hmm. The other end of the room was the stage, and the stage was just a slightly raised step. That's all it was, about 8 feet deep. That was it. And backstage, where the lizards had to come from, was the kitchen of the hotel. Oh. So Lil and Bruce were in these lizard costumes waiting for 45 minutes, the whole first act mostly, in the kitchen, while Frank and Gracie were out on stage. Right. But the opening cue of the show was our TD putting a bunch of coins in the light so that it would last for 2 hours, and me and our stage manager holding the snooker light toward the stage because it was facing down, so we had to face
on the floor. Right.
and so everything about it was sort of primitive and last minute. And then the actors hadn't done the show for 3 weeks
Right.
because it was our first performance in Philly. Then we took a week off. Then
Right.
we didn't do it in Sligo. So it was almost off the rails the entire night. Like they barely held it together in terms
Right.
of, but it was because of that, it was so live
Yeah.
that the audience was right with it. And
That's
they
what I knew
loved
you were
it.
going to say. I knew you were going to say that, and that turned out to be the best show we ever did.
It was so great, and we repaired to the pub after, and the hotel pub, and everybody was buzzing, and it was this magic of how great theater is at bringing people together and having a conversation and feeling the liveness in the room. It was really special.
Wow, that is a great story. Did you ever play in Dublin as well? You didn't just play small seaside resorts.
Play Dublin. We did a lot of different places. I came back from the tour after the first 2 weeks to basically to my job, but also to raise additional money because we didn't have enough money to cover the tour. So I was home trying to raise money to.
You're like Orson Welles, fundraising for the movie while they're still filming.
It was pretty crazy, and they went to a whole bunch of places. While I was there, this is the other really great story while I was there. So we're in Sligo for that first week, and our tour director had booked us at a theater in Northern Ireland in a town called Enniskillen.
Right.
Very, very close to the border of Ireland.
But still you have to cross over to the border into the UK.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so our videographer and he and I, our tour director, took our car.
And this is before the Good Friday agreements. Things are not peaceful.
Very much correct. Yeah. So we took our car, and I had to be the official renter of the car because I was older. I was 1 year older than our tour director and of legal age to rent the car, but I didn't know how to drive a stick shift.
Oh.
And he did, though he was a terrible driver. So he drove the car. So we're driving along these country roads in Ireland on the way to Northern Ireland, and I'm asleep in the passenger side, which is on the left there,
right.
And our videographer in the back seat asleep. And all of a sudden we wake up, we are literally spinning around and fly into a telephone pole and bounce off the telephone pole into a hedge and stop. We get out of the car, having woken up, at least the two of us, to this.
Nobody was hurt, I hope.
We get out of the car. The front side where I was on was mashed right up to, but never touched me. But the whole front was mashed. The telephone pole split and caved over, and the hedge was keeping us from going down a 10-foot drop. So we were very fortunate. Yeah. And then we walked to the closest house we could find because we're in the country.
Right.
And they brought us in, they gave us some tea, and we called the police. The police came out. Yeah. The police came out along with, we were able to call our fellow folks who were back in Sligo, and they brought the van up. And the police, I had to ride back with the three of us rode back to Sligo with the police in the police car. And I thought this was the end of my life as a professional. I will never be able to rent a car again. I'll have this on my record forever. Right. And as it turns out, nothing happened. We completely destroyed the car. They just replaced it. That was it. We didn't have to pay anything because we obviously took the insurance.
Right.
And by the way, we were so crazy to think to send our set of big platforms inside a giant wooden box. I mean, right. Giant.
Yeah.
So we shipped it for thousands of dollars. And so we rented a car, a minivan with a bunch of passenger seats, and a truck to carry the set around. And when we got to Ireland, Frank Wood, who loves driving trucks apparently,
right.
He said, I want to drive the truck. So we said, great. I was in the car up front with our tour director, Terry, and the rest of the company was in the van. And so Terry takes us to his parents' house as our first stop because we had to kind of get our sea legs, have a cup of tea, before we moved on to our first theater. So Terry takes us on this route to his family in Dublin, and Dublin streets are narrow and windy.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the car and I keep looking in the rearview mirror and seeing Frank knocking off a mirror of a car or hitting a sign and going, and we're laughing hysterically at this. We're also tired as hell. So we just see that, and we must have knocked 5 or 6 things on the way to Terry's parents' house. And that was the beginning. That was like, that set so much into play for that. It was a crazy time. The fact that we thought we could do it at all, but we did pull it off. 7 weeks, I think 11 towns and like 46 performances. It was
mayhem,
it was
absolute mayhem.
no internet.
So you get back from that trip, and I'm looking at this origin story on your website, and it says the next year the Berlin Wall falls.
Correct.
And that this was a problem. Then you think, oh, the international communication opens up, you can go anywhere you want. But according to you, because you were going to go to Hungary and Central Europe, but you had arrangements with the communist regimes, and suddenly that's all out the window.
Right. Well, we had someone who was working with us had connections in that part of the world, and that we decided that was going to be our second tour. And we made connections to theaters, all again through mail and occasional phone call. And we were planning it, but when the Iron Curtain fell, it became very difficult. We didn't have the internet, for one, so we didn't have lots of ways to communicate, but also
and phone traffic was not great to that part of the world then.
No, and these were countries that were literally in complete upheaval.
Right.
Complete. So we shelved it temporarily at first, but while we shelved it and realized that many of the places we were going to be either in direct upheaval or peripheral upheaval, because Europe was really changing at that time, we decided to do the plays that we had planned to bring to Hungary and Czechoslovakia and do them here in Philly, and then hope that by the time we had produced them, maybe we could launch a tour, but that never became a reality. And so what really happened is that our mission shifted for a number of reasons. That was one. And we decided to focus, instead of an international cultural exchange, on the idea of cultural exchange. We have a very diverse culture here in America and in a city like Philadelphia. So we decided, let's focus on that. So that was one of the big keys to how our mission evolved. The other, right around that same time, was I met playwright Tom Gibbons through Playworks, which was this company that I had directed some readings for, and I directed a couple of his plays. And we developed a very quick simpatico around political plays. That's what he was writing. And I got very excited by his work. And so the combination of what happened in Europe and meeting Tom and deciding to do new politically oriented plays really is what led us to the mission that we have today.
Wow. So I noticed that during this time you did some plays, like you did Irene Fornes's play Mud at the Annenberg. You also staged Wole Soyinka's The Bacchae, a version of Euripides, but set in West Africa. But let's move on to working with Tom Gibbons, because now how long before that had been the whole Move disaster? That was 86, right?
85. 85 was the fire. Okay. May 13th, 1985.
Right, which, again, to remind people who aren't familiar, just a small, highly organized community / religion / popular political movement had a siege with the Philadelphia police, and the police had destroyed them, had poured gunfire into their building, and eventually set a bomb off, dropped from a helicopter. People were killed, and eventually all the neighboring buildings and a whole neighborhood that burned down in West Philadelphia. Blocks and blocks of West Philadelphia were leveled. It was a disaster. So,
it was.
Yeah. And had anyone, when Tom said, there's a play in this, did he come to you with this idea?
So what happened is that, first of all, in real life, there were hearings, lots of hearings, but after the hearings, nobody publicly wanted to deal with this. It was sort of swept under the rug.
And nobody was punished. Nobody was sent to jail.
Correct. It was
lost
really,
their jobs. Nobody.
Not really. And there was a tremendous amount of frustration from every sector about how that was handled. And it was a traumatic event for the city. And Tom came to me after the first play of his that we did, which was called Pretending to America, starring Frank X. He came to me and he said, I really want to write a play about Move and use the hearing transcripts as one of the primary source material, and we'll find others. And I went to my board chair at the time, a woman named Roberta Snow, who was a West Philly resident, and she said, here's $1,500, which at the time was big for me, for us, and for Tom. So we gave Tom $1,500 in 1990 to do this commission. And Tom and I then, he did all this research of his own reading the transcripts and police reports and things like that. And then we together, we met with MOVE members many times. We met with city officials. We met with Wilson Good, the former mayor. We met with a key real life character in the play named Jim Burgeier, who was a white police officer who saved the only child who survived the MOVE fire, Birdie Africa. And Tom fashioned what today still gives me chills how brilliant the concept was. He followed this guy, Jim Burgeier, his story backwards from a moment when he was having a nervous breakdown. He felt that he felt guilty for having not saved more people. And he got to a point where he had put a gun to his mouth.
Oh.
And the play starts with that and moves backwards. And at the same time, we watch the MOVE organization from its earliest inception move forwards.
Right.
And they meet in the third act, which is the day of May 13th, 1985. It was a beautiful, powerful concept. And Jim Burgeier, this police officer, really worked hard with us on it. And we made it,
right.
as realistic.
And so you assembled
a
company of Philadelphia actors, Lillian again, but also
yes.
Tom McCarthy and
Yep.
Frank X. And who else was in it?
Brad Tennis, who unfortunately died many years later, much too young. Russ Whittall, Shalita Burchett, Kathy Simpson,
right.
Was a critical player in that show. And there were others. And we rehearsed the show. It was 15 actors, 3 acts, 2 hours, 45 minutes. And we planned an opening night where we invited all the people we'd met with, the MOVE members, city officials, Osage Avenue neighbors, etc., along with cultural leaders and the regular people who come to openings. And we planned on that opening night a post-show talkback with myself, Tom Gibbons, Ramona Africa, the one surviving adult MOVE member from the fire, and it was supposed to be Wilson Good,
right.
the former mayor, moderated by Larry Kane, who was a longtime news anchor here in Philadelphia. Well, Wilson Good dropped out at the last minute. Big shocker.
Yeah, well.
And we invited Jim Burgeier, this police officer whose story was in the play, to join us. And after the show, which was absolutely electric.
Well, yeah, because people are watching a play about themselves, about the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to them.
Correct. And it was the closest I've ever come to anything that blurred the line between art and reality. It was a community experiencing its story in front of us, right? And the opening night was just absolutely electric. By the way, we had no preview, so we didn't know how it was going to go. It was crazeballs. And we do the show, and at the end of the show, we come out to do this talkback. And the talkback went on for 45 minutes with people in the audience standing up and voicing their rage and asking hard questions of Tom. And it was very lively, very fiery, very exciting. At one point, someone from the Annenberg Center said, "Hey, we've got to end this because we still have a reception and you guys got to get out of the building at X time." So we moved the whole group out into the lobby and people were talking and buzzing. And Jim Burgeier, this former police officer who was almost going to kill himself because of all this, pulls me over in a sort of dark corner of the lobby. And he says, "Seth, watching the show tonight helped to ease my pain." And that moment, more than anything else, forever sealed the reason I do what I do. And for me and Tom, that was the most exciting night of our professional lives. And we know, and we knew at the moment, we will never get close to that again. That we could change a person, how they feel about themselves at a deep level, that we could ease someone's pain. And then the show helped the community, the people who come to see the show, process this traumatic event in their lives. Right. Which was exciting.
So you had that run there, and then something interrupted it, right? Something
we happened. Had the storm of the century at the time. Yeah. Yes, we lost an entire weekend of performances, and it was just crushing. It turned out that gave us a good enough reason to bring it back.
Okay, yeah, because then you staged it again, but at a different venue.
Same venue.
Oh, same venue. Okay.
Same venue. We brought it back the following fall. So it was in March of 93, and then we brought it back in October of 93. And we had to replace a couple of actors, but it was really great. And right before, and I should have mentioned, before we opened the show in March, 2 days before we opened, the Waco siege by David Koresh and the Branch Davidians started. And we got reporters from the New York Times asking us about the play, because it was so there were so many similarities.
Right.
And then a week or two before we opened the second production was the World Trade Center bombing.
The
And
first one. Yeah.
the first one.
Yeah.
Didn't bring the World Trade Center down, but it was an
Right.
attempt
Yeah,
to do so. Yeah. And we felt from the day that we started on this project that there was something in the zeitgeist where we were aligned in some really
right.
funky ways that made me believe there were higher powers.
So you've got a board together, you've got a mission, you've got a playwright in residence, and you've got a cause. You are now InterAct. Now you don't put it like on your masthead, we do political theater. I read a quote that you told a newspaper reporter once saying, we don't put that right up because people are afraid of agitprop. That might turn them off and might not actually affect their minds if you tell them that we're going to do political work.
Well, I like to think of political, that what we mean is the relationship between the individual and the state.
Okay,
the individual and the larger and the individual and the larger community. We are not interested in plays that tell audiences how to think about an issue. We have zero interest in that. In fact, our failures have been when the play ends up doing that, much to our dismay. We want to do plays that ask our audience, which we know to be generally liberal, generally educated, generally politically savvy, to grapple with their own thinking about things and to challenge their sentiments, not affirm them.
Well, so in 1997, the Wilma has just moved out of its space on 2020 Sansom Street, and they've got their new space. We talked to Blanca about that. So this space is opened up on Sansom Street, and you take over the lease for 5 years.
Well, first of all, we had been nomadic for that time in between. We were at the Annenberg Center, we were at the Painted Bride, we were at the Arts Bank. Yeah. We went out to a theater in Germantown called the Tolaine Theater, which was part of Germantown Friends School. We bounced around because we couldn't find an actual home. We wanted to be in residence at the Arts Bank, but they didn't want a resident theater. So when Wilma moved out, we, along with Venture Theater, which was another company our size that
came out of Temple University. Yeah,
correct. German Wilson was the artistic director, and Harriet Power came in to co-artistic direct. And we went in together on a co-lease for 5 years with the hope that it would be longer, but that was what we could commit to, and we didn't know how this was going to work out. And first of all, it was life-changing for us in the sense that having a home makes all the difference. One, you don't have to spend your time trying to plan for a different venue all the time and look for a different venue. You know where you're going to be. You can invest all your time and money into one space, and people know where you are. So it was really great from the beginning. And what happened is that Venture folded 2 years in, and we took over the lease entirely at that point, and we're getting stronger. We had a really hit production of Lebensraum by Israel Horovitz that won a whole lot of Barrymore Awards, and that kind of launched us into the next level of professional theaters.
So what was it about?
It was three actors.
Reparations, yeah.
Yeah, it was 3 actors playing about 60 roles, and the story was really asking what would happen if Germany made reparations for the Holocaust by inviting 6 million Jews from anywhere in the world to come make Germany their home to start the new millennium.
So a small play, a little chamber drama. Yeah.
Yes, but what it really was, it was 3 actors with cats and props and so forth on a very small stage, but it was absolutely a wonderful show. Scott Greer, Catherine Slusar, and Harry Philibosian, the late great Harry Philibosian, were the ensemble, and it was one of those shows that just clicked from the very first go of it, and it really helped launch us into the next level.
And when you say the next level, was that allowed you to get more funding, more attention from authors and playwrights and directors?
Everything, yes. Funding, audiences, interactions with literary agents, playwrights, everything about it. It just raised our visibility up.
And this is about the point. Am I right? This about the turn of the century, you started to write your own plays.
I did. I had ideas for a while, but I hadn't put them to paper. But as I was reading so many new plays, I started to think, gosh, there's a lot of bad writing out there. I think maybe I should at least try it because maybe my plays are better than a lot of this. So I wrote my first play, and it was actually produced at Theater Catalyst, which was above us at the Adrian. It was a smaller space upstairs, and got produced there again with Scott Greer, Bill Zielinski, Jeb Krieger, who's gone on to have a pretty successful career outside of Philly, Hayden Saunier and Steve Hatzey. And that was my first play, and it went very well. It got a Barrymore nomination and
That was Men of
ultimately
Stone?
got published, called Men of Stone. Yeah.
Yeah, about a sculptor.
It
Right.
was about Michelangelo. Yeah.
Oh, Michelangelo. I've heard of him. Yes, a
Yeah.
sculptor. Yeah. But then Missing Link, Black Gold, Two Jews Walk into a War, which is one of the best titles ever, was set in in Kabul.
Yes, in fact, that one, Two Jews, was a play that I wrote because someone brought in an article about this to me from the New York Times from earlier, and I went, "Wow, this is a play!" And I started writing the play, and found out there were two other plays that had already been written
Oh,
based on the same article, but they were very literal to the story. And I
uh-huh.
regrouped and rewrote this play, and it ended up being my most successful play by far. It's
Well, it
had
was
15,
Tom Teddy was in it, of course.
Tom Teddy was here. It had 15 or 16 productions now, and
Yeah.
just had one recently, over, what is that, 16 years. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Nice. As well as you produced at one point, there was a play called Three Christs of Manhattan about three people who believe that they're Jesus. And then there was also one called, if I have this title right, A Passing Wind, a musical.
Yes. And you might know something about both of those plays, might you not? But Passing Wind was my first musical, which I didn't intend to write the music for, but it fell to me. And then I had this great opportunity to get it produced at the first Philadelphia International Festival for the Arts at the Kimmel Center. And none other than you were Mr. Claude Monet, which was
Yeah.
a joy to me. I remember, it was not the easiest producing, directing, and writing.
We should tell the audience what the main subject of the play was, A Passing Wind.
The main subject, which is the mostly true story about a man named Joseph Pujol, who at a young age at the French Riviera discovered that he had what a doctor would call an anomalous sphincter. And he was able to do things with his butt that most humans can't.
He was a fartiste.
He was a fartiste. And so it was really about his story, his rise to great fame during the Belle Epoque and at the Moulin Rouge, and then his demise and disappearance into obscurity after World War I.
Right. And we ended up having remind me of the act Damien, who was playing
Damon Kirsch. Damon Kirsch, yes.
Right.
Yes.
You had this whole contraption that he had to wear because at one point he had to squirt water out of his butt.
We spent so much time working on that contraption, and we were probably 2 days away from making it work, but we had to stop it. We had to cancel it so that we could move on with the show.
Yeah.
That was one of my saddest moments in my theater life.
So every year, InterAct now is putting on about 4 plays, right, a year. But now there's other things you're doing besides working with InterAct. You helped to found the National New Play Network. I mean, starting in the late 1990s, InterAct's a founding member of it. And tell us what's the basic mission of New Play Network?
A National New Play Network is an alliance of professional theaters around the country who collaborate in innovative ways to extend the life of new plays. So the idea was that so many new plays that get done in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in Atlanta, whatever, get done once, never to be seen again. And the network came together to say, how can we create a network so that those plays that are worthy can have a place to go? And it took a long time, but NNPN ultimately, and I was deeply involved in this from the get-go, pioneered this idea of a rolling world premiere, where 3 or more theaters get involved and commit upfront to the same new play. And for committing to it, you get rewarded with some funding, sort of as insurance for the risk. That was the idea. And instead of every theater saying, we're going to hold on to this new play because we want to get all the attention for it, and we want to get any royalties or anything else that comes out of it, we were trying to promote the opposite. Let's try to share this new play so that more people see it and more theaters get a chance to work on it. And that has become a field-changing idea. And NNPN has gone on to do other field-changing things like the New Play Exchange,
right?
Which is to try to get to move away from the idea of submitting a new play for its consideration to theaters discovering new plays through their searches.
Right. But now 2 other organizations are just so impressive. One is the Philadelphia Scenic Works, I talk so much about actors and playwrights and directors on this podcast, and I have really, really neglected occasional exceptions, the technical side of theater. Really directed talking about designers, really neglected talking about stagehands, really neglected talking about props people. The Philadelphia Scenic Works is a nonprofit scenic shop which is there to give people a place to create the things, not virtual things, but actual things that we use on stage.
Yes. And it's also, first of all, it's the only nonprofit shop in the country
Yeah.
that we started. And the whole idea behind it is that commercial shops are trying to make a buck. That's their purpose. That's what profit is, right? And so the cost of scenery fabrication is very high. And many of us had a guy, it was usually a guy, who
Yeah.
built our shows. For us, it was Britt Plunkett, who was absolutely awesome. And he'd build it either in his garage or, in his case, a shop. And when he left his business, we wanted to not lose everything about it. So I brought together the leaders of the other small theaters that used him, and we bought out the shop, the equipment, and we formed Philadelphia Scenic Works to become a nonprofit that could serve primarily the small theater community in the same way, keeping costs reasonable and doing it in a more ecologically sound way.
All right. And on top of that, and we talked about this because when we talked to Charlie Gilbert a few months ago, he's one of your co-founders of Music Collab, which is a organization which is helping to develop musical theater works. And InterAct hasn't really been a home for musical theater. That's not part of the mission. You have worked on that separately, and you're a musician yourself. You love musicals, but you've been able to work with other musicians and collaborators and composers and lyricists in this organization. So that's three amazing organizations. And I now need to move quickly ahead, zooming into the 21st century, as I like to do. By April 2014, you're moving to a new home at the Drake Hotel.
Really, we really moved in January of 2015, but we had to move out of the Adrian at the end of June. That was our last show, which was Three Christs of Manhattan was the last show. And then we had to rent another office elsewhere. And then we oversaw the build out of the Drake and moved in January of 2016.
Again, a consortium of different theaters. There's 4 small theater companies, but InterAct was definitely the leader, and your offices are still there. You're speaking to me now from your InterAct offices at the Drake.
Correct. Yeah, we brought together 4 other theaters that all do new plays in a different way, and we called them resident companies so that they could have all of their public showings here, all their productions and readings and so forth. And we were the sole lessor. We pay for the lease. We raised all the money. We outfitted the space, but we brought them along as resident companies, and it's been a vibrant hub ever since.
Along Azuka and
Simpatico, Inishnua, and Playpen.
Right. Yeah. And it's a vibrant space. We just had the Philadelphia Fringe Festival, and the place was buzzing every night. Some 3 or 4 shows a day there.
Yep.
The different groups coming in and out. I know you're about to start your 38th season. You're about to start with a play called Walden by Amy Berryman. And you're starring in the play 3 people, Alice York, Campbell O'Hare, and Newton Buchanan, all of whom I've just watched do plays at the Fringe, all of whom are some of the best actors in town, some of the most original theater people. I mean, Newton was just in the Primary Trust, which I was seeing last night. Campbell O'Hare was working all over town, including Inishnua and others, and at the Wilma. And Alice York, along with Lightning Rod Special, just doing amazing clown shows and with Scott Shepard. So are you feeling the benefits still? I know we're in harder times, that you're basing your life's work in Philadelphia and being able to work with high-class talent like that. What is that like for you? How would you sum it up?
I have said to my local colleagues and to my national colleagues through NNPN and elsewhere, I think we have some of the best actors anywhere, period. That includes Broadway. I think we have great, not good, great actors, and we have tremendous depth in many areas. I think that's our strength. I think it's the heartbeat of our community is the actors. I would put them up against anyone, anywhere. I really would. And many of us think of the acting community here as kind of a repertory company, because you see them, just as you were just saying, you see Newton's going directly from Primary Trust to Walden. Campbell's going from The Real Thing at the Lantern over here to Walden. Alice just did Lions with Lightning Rod Special. And the audiences see them, and hopefully they see them do different work that they're showing their tremendous range, because these are great actors.
That is such a great way to end our talk today, Seth. Thank you so much for speaking. There's so much more we could talk about, and I may need to sit you down again just for archival reasons to go through every single play you've ever done. But for the purpose of the podcast, this was wonderful. Thank you for joining us on Adventures in Theater History.
My pleasure. Can't wait to do it again.
So that's our episode for today. My thanks again to Seth and to Frank Wood, whose voice we heard at the beginning. Please join us for our next episode coming out in a couple weeks' time, when we will be talking to Carol Rockamora, the founder of the former Philadelphia Festival for New Plays, along with the Philadelphia playwright Michael Hollinger. And if you've been enjoying this episode or this whole season of the podcast, or if you have any thoughts or suggestions or compliments, drop me an email. My address is aithpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. As usual, there will be additional images and information about InterAct Theater in the episode blog on our website, www.aithpodcast.com. Thanks to all of you lovely people for listening to the show today, and for coming along on another adventure in theater history, Philadelphia.